A warm welcome to everyone here at Pipples of the Lord Spiritual Warfare. Today we're going to take a look at ghosts or demons. Are these demons masquerading as our long-lost loved ones, or are these the actual spirits of the dead returning to visit us? And we'll talk a little bit about necromancy. But first, let's start with a prayer. The Archangel Michael prayer. Saint Michael, the Archangel, defend us in battle. Be our defense against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, O Prince of the heavenly hosts, by the power of God, thrust into hell Satan and all the evil spirits who prowl about the world, seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. In nomine Patri et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. So what are ghosts? Are they people stuck in purgatory, perhaps? Is purgatory actually right here? Well, no, I don't think purgatory is right here. But it could be another dimension of which we may catch glimpses of the spirits of the dead before they go to heaven or hell, if they go to hell, bleeding in and out of our reality. Just like all the spiritual beings of the entire paranormal lexicon, things seem to bleed in and out of reality. You'll get a glimpse only of something, and then that something may return again to tell you, yes, it's an actual something. So whether it be ghosts or just Elohim, non-corporeal beings, is there other dimensions that are very close to us, and can ghosts actually fall into that concept? Now, in the Catholic faith, many priests will say that God doesn't allow the dead to return to us except to ask for prayers. But I think enough people have had experiences where people did return from the dead for a brief moment to finish unfinished business or give a message that was important about something. I just don't know. And believe it or not, there is not a single occultist or religious on this planet that knows the truth about ghosts. They seem to be many different things, but we just call them all ghosts. There is a story of a Catholic priest who in modern day, our time, went to visit Auschwitz, and there is a place where you can actually touch the cremains of the deceased that were put to death in the gas chambers. And he said that he put his hands into the bones and ashes and prayed for their souls. And he went deep into prayer. And while he was in prayer, he began to perceive a group of people of which he was certain were tourists, people visiting the memorial. They were dressed, he could see out of the side of his vision, and there were a group of them that were there surrounding him, listening to his prayers as he prayed. The oddest thing about this is when he removed his hands from the bones and cremains, the people disappeared. Just like that. He turned and they were gone. He went and asked Pope John, I believe it was Pope John Paul, what had happened. He was curious. And the Pope responded by saying, I have heard this story many times, and that it was his belief that the dead were allowed to contact this priest, the living, so this atrocity would never happen again. So perhaps when we have glimpses of our loved ones returning from the dead, ghosts, they are there to say something important. We just don't know. But we mustn't forget also that demons and fallen angels are predatory. And I've said many times on other podcasts that they will often step in masquerading as our deceased loved ones because it plays on our heartstrings, and we will listen and we will let them in. They can do this anytime they want. So there is always that aspect to keep in mind. I think that not all ghosts are fallen angels and demons. I believe that God has many complex workings when it comes to the afterlife. I know that those of us who love God go to heaven, and those of us who reject God go to hell. In Luciferianism, and I've said this many times, they believe hell is very much like here. So again, the concept of purgatory. Purgatory is said to be a place where we are able to take respite and bring ourselves back right with God. It kind of sounds like a second chance to me, that we go into purgatory so we are prepared and clean to face God. So if you've made it to purgatory, you've made it. There are many stories about people who come face to face with God and say, I wasn't clean enough. I wasn't ready to stand before God. I wanted to be my best self, my most perfect self, my most gracious or in a state of grace self. Perhaps when we see some ghosts, that's the story. But there are other concepts of what ghosts may be. Many people say that ghosts are the spirits of the dead that are stuck and never went to the quote-unquote light. I'm not so sure I believe that, but we know about the divine triangle, and those we love, the generative magnetic force of love itself, will always keep us close to them and pull us to them. So if we love God, we are pulled to God. And if we love another after our deaths, we are pulled to them. When we are pulled to them in the afterlife, perhaps we are pulled back here because they are still alive. And perhaps that love keeps the deceased spirit close to here. And we are able to perceive them in that way. Again, very complex. Nobody has the answers. Or perhaps they are what we call wandering spirits. Souls that just wander. And then we can think of the Nephilim. They are actually ghosts. They are spirits that were once flesh and blood, half human, half fallen angel, from the angels going into the daughters of men in the biblical scripture. We read about that. By definition, they are ghosts. And all ghosts, by definition, can be called Elohim. Elohim is a descriptive word which simply means non-corporeal being, being without a physical body. There is also the concept of free will. In the divine triangle, God gives us all free will. So could it be that after death, if in our free will we choose not to go to God, to see heaven, or not to go anywhere, perhaps that is something that occurs. Then again, it would be a finite amount of time because, as we know, we all have to go somewhere. But somewhere may be a tiny expanse of time to the all that is, to God. But to us, it's a long time. So perhaps some of these souls are here for what seems like a long time to us, but really it's just a blink. Necromancy is a form of magic where operators will seek to contact the dead for the purpose of divination. It's also known as death magic or bone magic. It is even a kind of black magic, not to be confused, however, with Necromancy, which is black witchcraft. It is necromancy, knowledge of the dead. In the church, necromancy is called maleficium, conjuring of the dead. Within the occult, within many disciplines of the occult, whether it be witchcraft, ceremonial magic, shamanism, doesn't matter. Everyone contacts the dead. And usually That's a combination between astral magica as well as ritual magica. You are in consciousness going to meet the dead spirits of the other world, as well as performing a ritual to invoke or evoke them. A lot of channelers, a lot of diviners, a lot of mediums, a lot of seances are all seeking to do this. In shamanism, particularly, any culture, that is something that is done on a daily basis. There is ancestor worship, and there is always asking the dead, the future, for prophecy. Biblically speaking, King Saul, who had taken all the magicians, diviners, and sorcerers out of the land, there is the story of the Witch of Endor, and I'll read a small excerpt from it biblically. He himself was afraid of losing a great battle, and so in the Bible, we hear about this. So, the Witch of Endor, 28:3. Now Samuel had died, Samuel the prophet, and all Israel had lamented over him and had buried him in Ramah, his hometown. In the meantime, Saul had removed the mediums and magicians from the land. The Philistines assembled. They came and camped at Shunem. Saul mustered all Israel and camped at Gilboa. When Saul saw the camp of the Philistines, he was absolutely terrified. So Saul inquired of the Lord, but the Lord did not answer him, not by dreams, nor by Urim, nor by the prophets. So Saul instructed his servants, "Find me a woman who is a medium, so that I may go to her and inquire of her." His servants replied to him, "There is a woman who is a medium in Endor." That's the Witch of Endor. So Saul disguised himself and put on other clothing and left, accompanied by 2 of his men. They came to the woman at night and said, "Use your ritual pit to conjure up for me the one I tell you." But the woman said to him, "Look, you are aware of what Saul has done. He has removed the mediums and magicians from the land. Why are you trapping me?" She was afraid she'd get in trouble. "So you can put me to death?" But Saul swore an oath to her, to the Lord. "As surely as the Lord lives, you will not incur guilt in this matter." The woman replied, "Who is it then that I should bring up for you?" He said, "Bring up for me Samuel." Samuel was a great prophet, and Saul wanted to know what he should do about this terrible oncoming battle the next day. When the woman saw Samuel, of which she raised him up, she cried out loudly. The woman said to Saul, "Why have you deceived me? You are Saul." Evidently, Samuel said to her who it was. The king said to her, "Don't be afraid, but what have you seen?" The woman replied to Saul, "I have seen a divine being coming up from the ground." Saul said to her, "What about his appearance?" She said, "An old man is coming up. He is wrapped in a robe," which would be the shroud of the deceased. Then Saul realized it was Samuel, and he bowed his face towards the ground and kneeled down. Samuel said to Paul, "Why have you disturbed me by bringing me up?" Saul replied, "I am terribly troubled. The Philistines are fighting against me, and God has turned away from me. He does not answer me anymore, not by the prophets nor by dreams. So I have called on you to tell me what I should do." Samuel said, "Why are you asking me? Now that the Lord has turned away from you and has become your enemy, the Lord has done exactly as I prophesied. The Lord has torn the kingdom from your hand and has given it to your neighbor David. Since you did not obey the Lord and did not carry out his fierce anger against the Amalekites, the Lord has done this thing to you today. The Lord will hand you and Israel over to the Philistines. Tomorrow both you and your sons will be with me." So, a lot of times we hear, "Oh no, these are not ghosts. These are demons." But this witch did conjure Samuel. because the Lord allowed it. So every now and then, somebody is allowed to visit us. Yes, I know and am fascinated by the fact that ghosts are real. And yes, sometimes they are the diabolic, the demons, the fallen angels masquerading. But in a case like that, it's pretty clear that the test was passed. This was Samuel. But we don't have those specific kinds of tests. If we do, it's rare. So we never really know. And I think that's why the church condemns necromancy, which is the conjuring of the deceased. But we do see a lot of channelers and diviners online all the time, mediums and seances. Now, if they are conjuring simply human spirits, why bother? You might conjure up a really nice human spirit, or you might not conjure up a very nice spirit at all, if that's possible. But are these the demons that are masquerading as the humans at these particular things, with these particular things? That's why we're told not to go to mediums, not to go to diviners. And also prophecy is said not to happen anymore. After Jesus, we are told it doesn't happen anymore. However, you see many prophets, Christian ones, and so that is hotly debated. It's also hotly debated in the spiritual realm. Same thing. And we also have to remember that demons and fallen angels know everything about you every moment of your life. They perhaps have watched you and your family for your entire lives. So when these mediums and channelers, people say, oh no, they knew things about me that no one could have known. Well, that could also be attributed to the diabolic, who knows everything about us and who often or all the time watches us just to take that shot at us when we fall out of grace. And it's another way to get into our hearts and minds by appearing as our deceased loved ones, which they know also very well. So there's that to think about. Another aspect of ghosts could be something called the stone tape memories. This is the concept that a highly emotional event can take place, and the memories, the actual frequency, vibration, all of its characteristics can be imbued into the land. Now, we know this is possible because we can imbue objects with emotions, or we can imbue water, such as that infamous experiment that I spoke to you previously about, where water is imbued with love and it forms beautiful crystalline structures when frozen, and when it is imbued with hatred, it forms disjointed, ugly structures. So the concept is there of the stone tape memory, meaning these emotional battles or traumatic experiences within what we now call haunted houses. We often see the ghosts walking through the house doing the same thing, and when we try to communicate with it, it's as if we aren't there. This is stone tape memory. This is when a traumatic event or a memory is left in the land. And then there are the ghosts that we may find, or what we perceive as a ghost, with time slips. So if you were to think of time as an arm, and you're going along the timeline, and then you make a choice, and there are all these different fingers that you can go through. These are timelines, and sometimes we have experiences where our lines cross over with lines of the past or the future. It's an interesting concept. So I'll tell you an experience about one of my experiences within a place of power, of course. I was photographing archaeology one day with my dogs. And as I was photographing, I turned and came face to face with a man that appeared to be dressed as a man from the past would be. He was an indigenous person, and he was sweating and shirtless. It was the middle of winter with snow on the ground. My eyes met him, and my expression was as if I'd just seen someone. His eyes met mine, and his expression was as if he had just recognized me. He slowly turned away from me, as if turning away from a bear or a mountain lion, something that he had to be very careful around. He slowly turned away and walked down a hill that wasn't there, because as he walked away from me, he went down into the ground as if he were walking down a landscape that was completely different than what it was today. Now imagine being an ancient person and coming across me, an indigenous, dark-haired, dark-skinned person who had never seen someone that looked like me. He saw two strange animals with me. Dogs were probably not a part of his world. I had a camera, a tri-field meter. I had a cell phone. And I looked very different. I don't know what he thought, or when he returned to his village, what he told others in the past. But I often wonder if the mythology that we share today, coming from them, may have been created by something like a time slip. So there are many concepts about what ghosts are. Are they the diabolic? Are they deceased humans stuck in between? Did they not make it to God? Were they not pulled to God? Did their free will choice allow them to stay here? Or are they just a memory left in the landscape, energetically, a frequency that our brains pick up, translate into a visual? I don't know. Are they people from purgatory? Is purgatory right here, right now? As a lot of occultists believe, hell is very much like here and now. No one knows. I, as a Christian, as a Catholic, believe that when I die, I know where I'm going. I'm going to God. But those who reject God, I'm not so sure how God handles that. And I'm also not sure if by their free will choices, something different happens to them. I don't know if trauma allows them to stay in the in-between state. I don't know if they're all fallen angels and demons. All these theories to me can make sense. Is it just a complex mixture of all these things rolled together, much like the mysteries are themselves? The mysteries within the occult are called the mysteries for that very reason. These are things that don't want to be fully known, and ghosts are absolutely a part of that. So I hope you found something of use or of interest in this podcast. God bless you all, and I'll see you same time next week. But don't forget that I also have written a book, From Occultist to Christian, The Devil's Mistake. And you can find that on Amazon because I do have a chapter that addresses this in a little more depth. I'll talk to you soon. Good night.